What's the most legendary work meltdown you've seen? Writing financial software in the 80s. The systems analyst sitting at her desk near me suddenly burst into tears and wailed, "It's all so pointless. Money doesn't mean anything." This happened only a couple of days ago at my work. I didn't see it, but everyone's been talking about it. Apparently girl A came up behind girl B and slapped her on the hard hat and said, "Learn how to do your fkin job." And girl B just fkin lost her shit and went full UFC on girl A. Chokehold. Face punches. Regular choking. Girl A tried defending herself with various building parts as weapons. Both are now fired. But I don't really blame girl B. Girl A is a fkin annoying bitch and has been pushing everyone's nerves since she started. And I wouldn't want someone like that walking around treating co-workers that way. Working a retail summer job. A forklift driver was moving a skid of pickled eggs that wasn't wrapped properly. It fell. And a ton of juice and eggs went everywhere. Manager comes out and does the takes off hat and throws it on the ground while yelling "Almighty." After he went full gunnery Sergeant Hartman on the dude's ass for fking up. It was enough to make him cry and quit the next day. Edit. Some follow up. MR. Manager was with HR the next day. Lost his manager position for a few months. When he got his manager position back, he was pretty chill from now on. Some of us younger guys don't like it as much because his outbursts were quite funny. I remember one time I was getting an earful and I could hear some of my friends trying to contain their laughter in the next aisle. As for the forklift guy. He did come back and is now working mornings instead of evenings. Fellow pool guy threw a table into the pool we were cleaning. Apparently he got a text from his cousin that he was borrowing his N64. Edit. My boss was pretty tightly wrapped. One day I came into the restroom and there she was in a stall smearing her poop on the floor. I recognized her rings and muttering. And she was finished. She cleaned up the worst of it off the floor. Somehow got dressed with her achy hands. Got washed. And went back to work. Did you slowly back away all the way out of the building and then slowly reverse all the way home? New hire in her first week rubs co-workers the wrong way. Acting as though she's the hottest thing to hit our restaurant since food itself. When told her schedule for the next day, she argued with the manager about her availability. Threats of litigation start coming out of nowhere. She approaches two police officers who are trying to enjoy their meal completely in tears. Breaking down and begging them to arrest our manager for firing her unjustly. They helped escort her out of the building. Two police officers who are trying to enjoy their meal completely in tears. This killed me. Was the food that bad? This guy in a restaurant kitchen got in a fist fight with a younger guy. Punched him in the face. Backed up. Started shaking his face and doing the Scooby-Doo voice. He was nuts. I broke it up and took the other guy out of the kitchen to separate them and came back 10 minutes later and the crazy guy had perfectly cleaned his area, like freaking spotless, and clocked out early and never returned. Never seen or heard from him. Never picked up his last paycheck. Weirdest tea I've ever seen. Edit. When you say Scooby-Doo voice, I just imagined him giving him a quick jab and saying "Rarohi Raggy" while in a boxing stance. 9th grade. My English teacher had a breakdown in front of the class. Kept silent but started crying whilst writing on the overhead projector her complaints about the disrespectful kids in her class. When I was an intern, we had a high priority project come through that my mentor was working on. Really fast turnaround with many late nights. TTY coffee. And good beer. Anyway, it was towards the end of the project and I was finishing bring up on the board at my bench when I heard him muttering quietly to himself. I looked up to see if he needed me and watched him absolutely pound a computer monitor with his fist, then grab it. Smash it down on the floor before stomping on it screaming, "There's no goddamn DRC error, you fking SLT." He calmed down after a bit. Got a beer, then requested a new monitor. That's when I learned that no matter how mad you are, screaming at Altium will not make your sleep deprivation better. First, this involves the new UACute 5 notes. For those who don't know, They're polymer notes. And if you fold them up they tend to stay folded. It's important for the story. I served a customer. A friendly old man with white hair. Who paid with a folded UQ 5. I put it in the till. A few minutes later my boss was in the till and saw the folded note. He decided that the folds meant it had been rolled up into a tube to snort coke with. He was absolutely adamant. I said no. I just took that note. From an old man. He started yelling. Rolling the note up in his fingers to make a tube. Shouting at me. Look. It rolls up like this. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me I'm wrong. He kept shouting at me. Basically waiting for me to apologize and back down. Say I was wrong. But I wasn't, so I didn't. He wound up storming off. Throwing things and slamming things. He's f***ing insane and I should have complained, but there would be no point. Everyone knows what he's like and no one cares. I had a co-worker freak out on a customer at Walmart. I used to be a cashier. And people used to tend to treat us like shitty. Anyway. The lady got pissy because she couldn't price match some Doritos because it was the wrong size or something. Anyway, it escalates. We can't find the CSM and a few minutes later they are screaming at each other. The cashier's parting words were, "I ain't f***ing price matching your Doritos. You don't even need those Doritos. With your fat ass." Needless to say. That was her last day. Edit. Never would I have thought my most commented and liked comment would be something from Walmart. I'm currently dying right now. Not too legendary. But she was screaming and throwing shit because she got caught smoking in the parking lot. After causing drama non-stop the past few months. Her extremely sunburnt, overweight, shirtless father burst into the store threatening management if they don't give her job back. I was in court, lawyer, and we were arguing a motion and requesting sanctions against plaintiff's attorney. The judge starts talking and dressing down the plaintiff's attorney. Who, now offended, decided it would be a great idea to interrupt the judge, insult the judge, and flat out told him you were too stupid to make it in private practice and you do not know what the FCK you are doing. She had been licensed for all of 3 years. She is no longer licensed. Edit. She was being sanctioned for soliciting false testimony by falsifying an affidavit. I'm in radio and one of the group of stations I worked at had an oldies station. A rock station and a pop station in the same building. We had an announcer who was really eager and wanted to learn and work and was really a great guy. But the big bosses were total jerks to him and were stuck in their old ways of doing things. They treated the announcer, we'll call him Howard, really poorly, and Howard used to come in and vent about it. He ended up getting hired at another station, but before he left, he went into the music libraries and replaced all the Led Zeppelin songs on the rock station with a gospel song from the oldies station called Trumpets of Jesus for an entire weekend. Anytime Led Zeppelin was supposed to play, Trumpets of Jesus played instead. Howard has since gone on to become program director and has won all kinds of leadership awards. Total legend. Edit. For those asking where it was at a station in Canada. A guy I delivered pizza with had his parking spot taken by a guy he hated. He pulled out a giant monkey wrench out of his trunk and smoked him in the back of the head with it. Knocked him out. Where he got arrested. And fired. Well, that escalated quickly. From irritated to attempted homicide. I worked in IT and one guy, who was one of the most chilled guys I knew, was responsible for the deployment, updates and maintenance of a specific product that generated high revenue. One afternoon I was sitting at my desk and just heard a big crash and saw one of his 3 monitors on the floor. He stood up, shoved the next monitor over the divider onto the next section's desk, then swiped the 3rd monitor off the other side, picked up his keyboard and smashed it as hard as he could, kicked his chair away and slowly and calmly walked out the department without saying a word. He came back to work the next day as if nothing happened. Everyone knew the pressure he was under and was very good at his job, so nobody said a thing. Lol, I want that kind of job security. Guy who's hard of hearing had to blast the radio. Another guy gets sick of complaining to a dickless manager who does nothing. So he silently rips it off the cubicle and smashes it on the floor. Which is not carpet. And hard. Really f-king hard. Like the damn thing killed his grandmother. With a look of silent but unfathomable rage on his face like Hugh Jackman coming out of the water or whatever in that Wolverine origin movie. It explodes. All the guts capacitors, coils, resistors, transistors, circuit board etc go flying. And then as people are gasping and screaming he just sighs. Satisfied like he's just busted a huge nut and leaves. I pretended to be horrified but I was so happy inside. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese as a teenager. And one guy found out he was being fired. He responded to this news by, naturally, slitting his wrists and wiping blood on all the walls in the kitchen. I was coming in as it was ending. But we had to call the police and everything. Bizarre scene. We had this girl at work. And she liked to wear pants that showed a significant portion of her ass. Like if her ass crack was the Gulf Coast of the USA with Key West being her asshole, we were probably at Tallahassee. Someone complained to her manager. He didn't believe us so we had him sit in a meeting behind her and was completely horrified. So he had a conversation with her about proper workplace clothing. Well, she never got the message. And she got a phone call from HR giving a formal warning. She flips out. Storms into a meeting. Calls her boss a f-king pervert. Then proceeds to yell, "If you want to see my ass then see this," and moons the room. And storms off in a blaze of glory. No, we're complaining specifically because we don't want to see your ass. Actually it was the quietest, most calm meltdown. But it screamed of anger and frustration. So I used to work in a bank's call center. A colleague of mine came in the morning. He came in late and didn't even have his coffee, and logged in. The first caller was a rude asshole who started screaming obscenities so early in the morning. My colleague, without saying a word, hung up the phone while the customer was still talking, logged off and put his headset on the table. He walked calmly and get a pen and paper, wrote his resignation and handed it over to his supervisor alongside his access card. He walked out the call center and never came back. All of this without saying a single word. It was the embodiment of the phrase "action speaks louder than words." In high school I worked at a grocery store and this kid was all pissed off at another bagger and swearing in front of the customers. He said he was hoping he'd get fired. I told him he should quit before he gets fired so that it would look better on his resume in the future. A few minutes later I realized he was missing. Then suddenly he comes around the corner from the manager's office. No longer in uniform. He threw his uniform in the trash in front of the manager. Then he looked at me and said loudly, "I took your advice," then proceeded to walk across the front end. Point to each associate saying FCKU to each of them and walked out. Everyone was staring at me after and I said I did not tell him to do that. FCKU. 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 You're cool. FCKU. I once worked with a guy on salary whose availability was clearly abused, who used to joke that he just wouldn't come in tomorrow. Then one day he didn't come in. In fact, no one could figure out where he was. Turned out he moved states and got a new job and just didn't bother telling his boss until he was already long gone. Good on him. It was a call center and probably 80 people were working at the time. All of our cubicles are on the same floor. She sends an email to our boss and CCs the entire office. Something along the lines of FCK this place, FCK the boss, FCK the break room, basically FCK everything and your family. Then the last line. This particular staffer has been on the edge regarding her being employed for about a year. The office manager finally decided to let her go after the 5th time she brought all 5 kids, under 10, all, to work and they destroyed our Keurig. It is on film. The eldest picked it up and slammed it on the floor repeatedly. Her ranting featured extremely loud swearing, calling damnation on the manager, and an itemized list of why we all could go to hell. What's your war story? Rubber bands. They're everywhere. 1. 2. 3. Apparently, someone in my office was putting rubber bands all over the place. Like around things where it shouldn't be. It annoyed this one girl. And she started accusing people on who did it. Ended up walking through the area the rubber bands were in. Yelling about how they were everywhere. Got a work email about how we shouldn't be using work supplies on things other than what they were meant for. TLDR. We had a rubber bandit. I went to a private high school. The teachers having 12 to 14 hours days plus their grading wasn't at all weird. One of my teachers ended up completely snapping one day in the middle of the school year. He went on a full-on rant at one of his classes because they wouldn't stop talking. He was so angry the entire class of about 30 students was being yelled at full volume for 45 minutes of their class time because of this and left them all in complete shock. For the first 20 minutes of my class period he sat there. Quietly. Without addressing the class. I've never seen a group of 20 teenagers so silent in my life and I'm sure I'll never see it again. There have been many meltdowns where I work between the same two people. Their father and son and they don't see eye to eye. The son is the president of the company but the father and mother own majority stock. The son is an alcoholic with a violent temper. Though he's okay when he isn't drunk. And the father is 84 and suffers from Alzheimer's but is still somewhat there. They get into shouting matches over family drama at work. People have ended up being arrested and fired multiple times due to unrelated reasons. But most of the time it just adds fuel to the fire because someone within the family is the one who's being arrested or fired. I've watched the son punch holes in the walls and storm out of the building. Keys in hand. And speed off down the road. The father goes back to what he's forgotten he's already done. On average. This happens once or twice a week. My 8th grade teacher got mad at a kid for taking too long sharpening a pencil because the sharpener was broken. She storms over. Grabs the pencil. And starts sharpening. But she still can't get it to work. So. She huffs over to the student pencil drawer. Whips it open and yanks the drawer so hard it comes flying out. Inside. A pencil sharpener cracked. So a classmate and I tried to clean it up. Then she yelled at us and told us to sit down. MRS. Crazy then assigns the class a 4-paragraph essay instead of a Socratic seminar. Because we couldn't handle mature topics. Which is how she interpreted a few nervous laughs. The period after. She threw a chair at a student. This is the teacher that has broken down in class several times before and has a tendency to throw writing utensils and smartboard markers. Not at work. But in 7th grade. One girl ripped the pencil sharpener off the wall and threw it at the whiteboard. Denting it. Then she threw a chair at our teacher and the principal had to come remove her from the classroom. Dude, 7th grade girls are nuts. We had a really awful counselor at school who would go on to become a registered sex offender. He hated this girl I kinda knew and during a meeting called her an N-word. She was black. And told her she'd grow up to be a prostitute like her mom. Y'all, she flipped. Grabbed his arm and snapped it over his desk. He wore a cast for almost a full year after that. She threatened to stab him as the principal hauled her off. They searched her locker and found a knife. At 15 she was arrested. Sent to juvenile detention for 2 years and then shipped to some reform school. Saw her about a year ago. She had a kid at 19 but is steadily employed and seems to be doing better. Some guy next to me just screamed out FCK. Comma. Did you all say FCK? In return like answering wolves? Guy got fired at my work for ordering high cost items and saying they were for clients. They were purchased using state funds and he would just take the items home. Well. He memorized the phone number receptionists use to page people. It's an actual phone number so anyone is able to call it and it'll go through the speakers. So this guy called it and basically said all of these obscenities about people. It was like that scene in The Office where Michael roasts people for making fun of him. But this guy was very NSFW. It was kinda funny though. The best part was nobody could do anything about it because he was calling from an outside line and wasn't even in the office. I'm a bagger at my local grocery store, first job. And we had just hired a new guy about 2 weeks earlier. Anyways, this guy gets his 15-minute break and comes back on time as normal. Only one problem. He is now high out of his mind. Spends about 30 minutes unbagging groceries before management notices and pulls him aside to talk to him about it. Also note, this guy hasn't spoken anything but gibberish for this time. But he freaks out. Starts yelling in his gibberish and throwing cans all around. Yep. That's it.